Welcome back to A Time to Think, where Pastor Chris Tillman, Pastor Josh Holland, we seek to thoughtfully engage with and respond to important issues in the culture in the church. Pastor Chris is in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and I'm in Wausau, Wisconsin. We started off with a number of episodes in this podcast on Carl Trueman's Strange New World, digging into really dicey issues of gender and sexuality and individualism.
And if you haven't listened to those, we definitely encourage you to scroll back,
Yeah.
as it were, because we think it's very, very important to
all of those available.
understand. Yeah.
Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and they're pretty approachable, right? 20, 30 minutes for
Yep.
most of them, so you're able to comb through those pretty quickly. And now we're pretty much in a completely different topic, talking about media diet, media consumption. I think it just goes to show, Chris, that we didn't start this podcast necessarily because we had one thing or
Right.
one niche that we were going to be the political podcast or this podcast. It was
Heavens no.
there's just important things that come up, and we think Christians need to think about them, and so we want to spend some time
Absolutely.
thinking about them. So we've done 5 episodes so far on media consumption, thinking about the entertainment culture of media or the triviality of media, and then in our last episode, just talking about the time. We don't have that much of it. It goes by quickly, and so we need to be honorable in how we use it. And a huge part, Chris, about being honorable with our time is being purposeful with our time. So we're talking about telos.
What does that mean, Josh?
What does it mean, Chris? I just spent the whole 5 minutes doing an intro. Why don't you talk? Tell us what telos means.
Telos is a word.
Tell us what telos means.
Tell us what telos means. Well, telos is a word that comes from the lovely Greek language. And Greek is a wonderful language, at least ancient Greek, which is what you and I have studied. We probably couldn't talk very well with somebody who's in Greece today.
Can read it okay.
Giannis is Greek, but I don't know that he would share much of our Greek knowledge with the world of oldie,
Right.
O-L-D-E, old Greek. But it comes from a Greek word. It is a Greek word, in fact, that means goal. Goal. And so when something has a telos, the telos is a goal. What is
Right.
the end of it? What is the purpose? What is the end result?
So in apologetics, defending the Christian faith, you have the teleological argument, which is what?
And it is an argument based on purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
That the earth has a goal to it, right? We're moving towards some sort of climax, some sort of consummation. It's not just a happenstance existence. And so telos is this word that is really important for the Christian life because we don't believe that that time is just happening to us.
Right.
But one of the things we mentioned in the first episode, it does often feel like time is just happening to us, but we don't believe that's true. We believe that God in eternity has already numbered the days that we have. We don't know what that number is, but God has numbered our days. God has given us specific uses for our days, and therefore God has given us a purpose or a goal for those days. But when it comes to media consumption, our media diet, whether that's on our phones or our televisions, it can often be a purposeless existence. Maybe the greatest purpose is, I want to get through this, whatever this is. This show, this podcast, I want to get to the next thing. But it's often a pretty purposeless existence. It's not really producing anything good. And when we think about media as a correlative to diet, we think about how often purposeless our food and our eating is. We get up and we go get food because in a break at work, or we get up and go get food because I guess it's time to eat. But we're not using food for nutrition or for fueling our body. It's just kind of a thing that we do. How do you see the lack of telos, the lack of goal in our media usage?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does go back to what we talked about for several weeks in the issue of how our culture is oriented and the way that people view their being. There was a time in which culturally people understood, at least we'll talk Western culture, probably early 1600s until early 1900s. There was a time in Western culture where people generally acknowledged the fact that their lives had some type of meaning and purpose that was outside of themselves. But really since the influence of, you have modernist and a postmodernist thought where people start judging the human experience on basis of, well, how do I feel? What is my physical experience of everything? Because there simply can't be something that's supernatural, something
Hmm.
that exists above just the natural phenomena in the world. And people start getting influenced by this to the point where now we're at a place where, as we look at our own lives, the only purpose that we are encouraged to have, and I will say encouraged, because this is how our culture disciples us, how it teaches us, how it
Hmm.
wants us to learn. We're encouraged to see our lives as something that has a purpose only as great as our vision for what our life should be. And so, if the vision for your life is, I just want to play video games and get a paycheck,
Hmm.
we can do that. Like
Right.
we can do that. And there are plenty of guys around our age who decide, yeah, that's what I want to do. So as long as I can make enough to do these things, as long as I can make enough so I can sit comfortably instead of
It's
thinking,
a work to get to the weekends type of mentality,
yeah,
right? The weekend is really the pinnacle of your life, and that's where pleasure happens. But you can even extend it to work to get to the weeknights,
yeah,
because more and more weeknights are a night because of media availability. Weeknights are a night of pleasure too.
yeah, or I even push back a little bit more to, you see what's happening. You've mentioned Twitter several times in our last episode, but since Elon Musk took over Twitter, one of the things that he has done is, I would say, argue, Elon Musk is not a Christian man, but there's some Christian ethical priorities that he is probably in enforcing within the workplace that weren't there before within Twitter as a corporation. Because from my understanding, at least, the way that Twitter would encourage employees to use time would be whatever makes you feel good. And as Elon Musk has come into Twitter, and this is an example where we're seeing this in a culture, he's saying, got to be in your office 40 hours a week. You have to produce something.
Hmm.
We want to see results. We don't just want to say, okay, we have happy employees, because happiness is, it should not be a
Hmm.
goal. And that's where I think, some Christian people who might see what Elon is doing might feel some sense of like, well, that makes sense. And that's because he's simply enforcing an ethic that dovetails with Christian ethics, which is time has purpose and you shouldn't
Yeah.
just throw it away.
Yeah, and just to pause there, because I think anyone listening, like, well, I want to be happy.
Hmm.
So you're telling me happy is not the goal, but I do want to be happy. I think the Christian view is happiness is a beautiful, beautiful secondary byproduct of the purpose of
Hmm.
your life.
Yep.
If you think about the Westminster, is it the Shorter Catechism that says the
What
the
is the chief end of
goal,
man? Yeah.
yeah, the chief end, the goal, the telos of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever,
Right.
right? That was a really Piperian, John Piper way
Sure.
to. I had a young woman in our church, a young like 4 5 year old, who drew a picture of me preaching, and my arms are straight out, and
Wow.
I was like, she gets it.
Soaring like the eagles.
But in that moment, I thought she's paying attention.
She's paying
She's
attention.
watching. So I digress. The purpose of that, to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever, is that in Christianity, happiness and joy are not primary, but they are the primary byproduct of the
Right.
goal, right? In our time conversation, we talked about certain acts of productivity, like getting your stuff in your backyard taken care of, or getting the house in order, or going to the gym. All of these things the primary pursuit of them might not be happiness, but they lead to a certain byproduct. And
Hmm.
that's probably where our culture is missing so much, is that
Right.
we don't have much of a category for things that aren't immediately enjoyable, but that do produce a longer
Yeah.
lasting type of enjoyment. And
Or
so,
even the difference between happiness and satisfaction. I
sure.
would say, um, I love working on construction stuff, cars, whatever. Um, it's not necessarily happy getting a bloody knuckle working
Hmm.
on a vehicle. It's not necessarily happy crawling through insulation, but man, it's satisfying when it's done.
Right.
And so there's, I think, just a blanket idea that people have. I want to be happy, but look at the mass distribution of antidepressants that exist
Hmm.
in our culture. People aren't happy, but they want to be happy because they think the only category they can kind of put their purpose in is this very nebulous feeling of, I just don't want to be uncomfortable.
Right.
I don't want to have to experience anything that would be in any way painful, even if there's a result that would be satisfying on a different level than just how I feel.
Yeah.
And so the Christian has to think in different layers when we think about the purpose of our time, because we, like you said, we want people to be happy, we want people to be miserable. God wants people to be happy, but happy within boundaries and happy through different categories that transcend just a feeling, an amorphous feeling.
And a temporary feeling. That's another
Right.
place where, so if we're summarizing so far, our culture's current view of the purpose of our time is pleasure and happiness.
Yeah.
And that is a very short term pleasure and happiness. It keeps us from thinking long term. And so we're thinking, how will I be happy now, not what will I do now that will lead to satisfaction next year, right? We're always thinking
Right.
now, what can I eat now? What can I consume media wise now? And I think that misses an incredible truth, which is that sacrifice or long-term investment leads to a great, steady joy. And so I think about the church. A lot of people are looking for a place that they like, or they're looking for a place they maybe feel like they belong. But the truth of that is you got to be there for 7 years.
Right.
I think about the abundant satisfaction and joy I find in some of the people that I live with in this church, that I just see every week, that they give to me and I give to them, that we laugh together and we spend serious time and there is just an abundant joy. I've been here for 7 years, man.
Yeah.
And I want to beckon people to say, man, if you leave the church when you're not experiencing temporary joy, you will never experience long-lasting
Right.
joy. I think about people my own age who are foregoing having children.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you are able to have kids, I don't want to be callous to people that are having a hard time having kids. But by and large, the bigger problem is people my age that are probably statistically able to have kids that are choosing not to because they see the short-term pleasure of financial career investment or travel or individual freedom with their time. That's a greater pleasure and a greater purpose.
Yeah.
But what you can't really know until you have a kid is the immense joy of just looking at your kid.
Right.
You got a kid, Chris. I like your kids. I don't experience the same joy looking at your kids as I do looking at my kid.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
There's just something God has done in our hearts where we have an immense satisfaction in viewing the children who we were able to beget because of him. But that's a long-lasting thing. We think it's such temporary, short-term pleasure, not long-lasting.
Yeah.
So then that bleeds into how we use our time with media, because we've been trained that the ultimate goal of your life is pleasure and happiness. You need to think short-term. You need to think now.
Yeah.
And you know what is super pleasurable now? This phone.
Yeah.
Or the television.
Yeah.
So what do we do here with this interplay, Chris, of short-term pleasure as the goal and how that drives us to media?
Yeah. In our last episode, we talked about numbering our days. And, before we started recording this episode, we were just pretty much on complete agreement. This is just a continuation. This episode is a continuation of our last episode, because coincidental with purpose is time, right? So you can't, if you have a project to be done, there's rarely ever going to be a project that doesn't have some type of termination point on it.
Right.
Like, you have to get something done within a certain time. And so when you look at our life and the way that Jesus calls us to look at our lives, we've been preaching through the Gospel of Luke, and we're in a section right now where Jesus has been talking about, showing up. I mean, we just preached yesterday in Luke 13. I think we're both preaching the same chunk of scripture, where Jesus is saying, look, at the end of all things, there are going to be a lot of people who come before me and say, let me in, let me in, let me in, let me in.
Isn't it astounding that each week, the past 6 weeks, I've thought, Jesus is again telling us to look at the last day.
Yeah. Yep.
He's again. I mean, it's
Yep.
chapter 10, 11, 12, 13, and again in 14 this week. He keeps saying, look at the last day, and it's going to determine your purpose now.
Exactly. And so, when we preached on that yesterday, and as I was preaching in Stephen's point on the issue, he talks about enter by the narrow door. And one of the emphases that I brought out was to say, look, any representation of the Christian life that suggests that God's purpose for you right now is just to be healthy, wealthy, prosperous, and happy is a lie. And it's a false gospel. It's false good news. It's not really good news, because really good news says you're in a fallen world, and it's going to be harder. If you're a Christian, it's going to be harder because there's a narrow path that leads to life. There's only one path that Jesus knows for us to take. And that life, as he is communicated throughout the Bible, I mean, it's not just like one place that we're picking out here. Throughout the Bible, Jesus has said that for those who are genuinely his people, you're going to experience some unique hardships. But when you keep in view that there is an end goal,
Come on, Chris, preach to us.
as Mark records this, Peter asked the question about, Lord, we've left everything. We've left everything, and what are we going to get for this? And I think anybody who's a Christian long enough thinks that at some level. Like, man, I've given up certain things that I otherwise would have had. I see friends, former classmates. I see these people getting these things. What am I going to have?
And they seem to be real happy.
Yes, they seem to be very happy.
Oftentimes that's a farce. Oftentimes it's the Facebook farce. They're not actually that happy.
Right.
But they sure do seem to be happy.
Yes.
And I want to be happy.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah, and it's funny as Jesus answers that question for Peter about Peter's desire to feel satisfied, to feel happy, to feel good, is he says, anybody who leaves, family and land and all these types of things is going to get a whole lot more. But right in the middle of that, Mark uniquely points this out, that Jesus said, and persecutions. It's unique to Mark. It says, and persecutions, in the midst of all of these really good things. And the importance of that for us is to understand that Jesus' clear picture for the Christians to say the end result of living in a world where you're going to experience the joys of Christian fellowship. I mean, there is no dearer place on earth, as Charles Spurgeon said. There's no dearer place on earth than the local church. And we love the church.
Oh, my wife and I were in tears on Saturday night because of some joy that people in our church brought us.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, it's that long-lasting, you can't describe it until you have it type of joy.
It's amazing. And so there's so much joy to be had within the blessing of the church community. There's so much joy to be found there. But man, one of the blessings is that you walk together through hardship. You walk together through suffering. You walk together through difficult situations that are unique to God's purpose to refine you. But he's refining you for a purpose that, as I kind of landed the plane yesterday in the sermon, in 1 Peter, Peter says, for a little while, you may have needed to be tested. But it's going to be found a result, the tested genuineness of your faith, found to be a result in praise, glory, and honor, revelation of Jesus Christ. And so Peter's saying, look, you look forward. Jesus has been saying in the gospel, look forward, because your purpose is going to be the glorification of God in the midst of your purpose of making much of him in this world, even in the midst of suffering. And it's going to be eternal joy. And Peter says, he's like, you haven't seen him, but you love him. There's joy to be found there. But, there's this interplay of living in a fallen world where you have a purpose that is not going to be realized right now.
Right.
But there is joy along the way as you keep your eyes forward. And so how you invest your time here, how you invest your time now is indicative of what it is ultimately you're living for.
Right. Yeah, and interesting how the Spirit works, because I landed the plane with the Apostle Peter too, but it was in 2 Peter.
The Apostle Peter too.
The Apostle Peter too. And in that, Peter says, because of what God has given you, make every effort to increase faith, virtue, knowledge, self-control. Now, you just look at self-control. That seems such an antithesis to what people view as happiness right now.
Yep.
What you should pursue, Chris, is being self-controlled. Well, isn't that going to keep me from all the things that are pleasurable?
Yeah.
If I'm self-controlled with my food, I have less pleasure. If I'm self-controlled with my media, I have less pleasure. But Peter is saying, because of what God has done for you, strive, make every effort to increase these virtues, because then your purpose to be effective for the Lord Jesus Christ is going to result in the salvation ready to be revealed in the last time, right? And so you have this strive to enter through the narrow door, make every effort to increase in Christ-like character, all the while the promise, Jesus in John 10, I am the door. Whoever enters by me finds life and pasture. And so you still get the goal,
Hmm.
but it's a better, more long-lasting goal. Uh, and so we're trying to reframe this idea of the goals of our life, because if we don't have these long-lasting joys and goals in front of us, we're going to be captive to, you've mentioned it multiple times, passivity. The passive use of our time and the passive use of media without having a goal. And one of the things that would be helpful for us to discuss is, um, I wrote down, when you don't have a purpose for what you consume, then you consume based on pleasure rather than purpose.
Mm.
So when you don't have a purpose for what you consume based on pleasure rather than purpose. We know that to be true with our diets.
Hmm.
Okay, if we're not physically exerting ourselves to the point where we get really hungry or we need a certain type of food for energy, we're not working a job that is manual and
Hmm.
labor, then why do we eat? We eat what we want. We eat when we want it. We'd rather have something cheesy and warm than something green and cold, because we're really not eating for a purpose
Right.
other than pleasure. And if we're honest, that's how we use our media.
Yeah.
We're It's in those really hard moments of our day or those hard days of our weeks where we just would rather be something pleasurable. It's more pleasurable to get on the internet or more pleasurable to watch TV. Hard moments in our marriage,
Mm.
or even just dull moments in our marriage.
Sure.
What's easier, to try to strike up some sort of conversation after the kid goes down?
Mm.
I just go watch a show.
Hmm.
And I feel like we have to constantly say, I am not advocating Anabaptism.
Right.
Means complete removal from the culture. You can't watch TV. You can't do anything with electronics. I'm just saying, if that's what I do 5 times out of 6, that's a problem.
Mm.
And that's where we don't want to go, is to say, oh, self-control here, long-term view here, a purposeful existence here means I need to really think, what is the purpose for what I consume? So how do you view those ideas of purpose and consumption in regards to your television usage? Maybe we'll get real down to the bone on
Yeah.
a weekday basis in the Tillman household.
Yeah.
How do you view purpose and consumption?
I mean, man, it's I am more than guilty of this in terms of how my life functions, and it's interesting because when we were first married, my attitude was more of the Anabaptist view almost, and it was like, oh, we've got a very limited selection of shows that
Mm-hmm.
we're able to watch, okay to watch, and everything like that, and I think over time, God allowed me to appreciate some freedom that I had in terms of media use, that I didn't need to live with a constant sense of, oh, did I just watch something sinfully? It's like,
Right.
the bottom line is, you do live in a fallen world, and as long as you're participating in culture with unbelievers, you're just going to have some type of interaction. It happens. It's normal. Um, but I feel like, in the process of experiencing that freedom, I mean, man, the ease with which you slide into the world of turning something on. I mean, I'll be very, very, very ready to admit the fact that for me, because, um, you know, my job and your job is all day long thinking about heavy things, thinking about weighty things, dealing with difficult situations with people at times. Um, you get to the end of the day and you're thinking, I've lived a purposeful life all day, and it's time to live unpurposefully right now. And I would say that where I try to be watchful is, and this isn't necessarily even where we're going with this, but I do think it bears mentioning here with media, is to say, like, what is the content of what you're consuming?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think then sometimes people get into the world of, are you consuming content passively in such a way that you're not even concerned with, it's like, well, everybody's watching this. I mean, right now, House of the Dragon is a real popular thing for people to watch, which is a prequel to the Game of Thrones series. And I've had conversations with Christian people where you know it may be a visually appealing experience to watch something like Game of Thrones, and from what I understand about the show, it sounds like something that the storyline sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Lord of the Rings type thing, and like watching Lord of the Rings, but then you hear a little bit more of the content. You're thinking, man, if I'm consuming this and I'm just letting it happen to me, and I get to the end of the day and I want to check out in some capacity, my concern is that am I checking out on the content of what I'm consuming?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I get to the end of the day and it's like, 9 o'clock at night, I sit down to watch a show or two with my wife, fall asleep, is that, am I allowing that material to then not just disciple me in terms of use of time? Maybe somebody was listening or watching who has a long day and they get to the end of the day and they feel like that. I just encourage you to consider, like, are you being discipled by your content?
Right.
Not just the use of the time itself, but you're being discipled by the content.
Yeah, man, you are putting the ball on the tee for our last two episodes perfectly, because we're talking about temperament. What is the
Mm-hmm.
content doing to us?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're talking about the idea of turning off.
Mm-hmm.
When is it appropriate to turn our brains
Right.
off? When is it better to push through those types of stressors? But what you've really helped us dig into here, Chris, is that there are layers of purpose. There is purpose of just time in general. How much time am I devoting to this thing versus to other purposeful
Yeah.
things? There's the layer of let's take a neutral show. It's not amazingly Christian. It's not amazingly sinful. It's just neutral. But still, I need to weigh through the idea of like just the purpose of why I'm watching it or how much I'm
Yeah.
watching. But then you have something that is probably expressly sinful, and that's not only not doing something purposefully, but it's removing. It's setting you at a deficit because
That's
now,
funny against your purpose.
right.
Yeah.
And so you have these different layers that we have to consider as Christians, and I said in another episode something that might just become a tagline for us is we're willing to be annoying to be helpful.
Sure.
And I think this is part of the annoyance of the Christian life, is that God does call us to think through these things. We don't just say, it's not, it's not the worst sin in the world, so I'm fine doing it.
Sure.
And say, man, where's my heart at when I'm doing this? What's it producing? Where's it taking me? Is it helpful? All things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial.
Right.
And Ephesians 5, Chris, tells us, because the days are evil, which I think gets a little bit at the fact that the days are limited.
Mm-hmm.
Because the days are evil, we have to make the best use of the time.
Yeah.
We have to redeem the time, I think, is the translation that I really, really value. And that calls us to a purposeful existence of saying, is there redemption in what I'm doing with the media that I'm consuming? Is there purpose in what I'm doing? And I think pleasure can be a purpose. Maybe this is a
Sure.
clarifying thing. Here's an analogy for a difference. I find myself often at some point wanting to read an update on Tennessee Volunteers football. I think that's a fine purpose.
Especially now. Yeah.
Yeah, I told my wife this whole topic of media diet is so challenging for me because for the first time in 15 years, my team is good. And so I might have the purpose. I would really like to read an article on Tennessee Volunteers football. That's a fine purpose. Might be a great way to use a quick lunch break, but that's really a 7-minute task.
Yeah.
Well, what happens, Chris? That turns into 4 articles at least, and then hopping on Twitter, and then just this kind of malaise where I'm not even really caring to read anymore, and it's been 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And what I've done is gone from a decent purpose, which is I'm really interested in a good pleasure, to I have wasted a bunch of my time.
Right.
And those are types of things you and I have talked before. The difference between watching a show or 4.
Yeah.
It's super hard to stop after 1.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're just continuing until we feel bad enough to stop, then it's not a purposeful use.
I like that.
Time.
If we're just continuing until we feel bad enough to stop.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
So a couple things that I'll note here before we get done. If we don't have a purpose for our devices will use us. If we don't have a purpose that keeps us from our devices will use us. So say it again. If we don't have a purpose for our device, namely, we're not thinking through, I want to read this one article for the purpose of, hey, I want to take a 15-minute break. Like when I used to work retail, TJ Maxx, you got a 15-minute break, right?
You were a Maxinisto.
Yeah, I was. I worked at Home Goods, so.
Oh.
So you said, here's a 15-minute break. It's time-stamped. There's a purpose for it.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes our 15-minute Twitter or Facebook or Instagram breaks turn into an hour.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm not saying, here's the time allotted for this specific purpose, I need to know this device is going to use me up and spit me out.
Yep.
And I'm going to feel tired, and I'm going to go until I feel bad.
And you'll come back for more tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if I don't have a purpose for my device, it'll use me. And if I don't have a purpose to keep me from my device. if I don't view my child, or if I don't view my wife, or I don't view the scriptures, or I don't view time in Christian community as more purposeful than entertainment, and therefore worthy of keeping me from
Right.
entertainment, and worthy of me putting my phone in a different room and having a TV in a different room, it's going to use me, man. I'm going to
Yep.
sit there and go, I'd rather be on it.
Yeah.
I'd rather be on it. It's better purpose. It's more
Mhm.
pleasurable. And so I'll just end with that. If we don't have a purpose for our device, it will use us instead of us using it. If we don't have a purpose that keeps us from our device, it'll use us rather than us using it.
Well said.
Thanks. Well said. I'm going to write that down. It's my affirmation for the day. Thanks for taking some time to think as we seek to thoughtfully engage and respond to important issues in the church. We got 2 more episodes on media diet coming, one on temperament. How's it changing us? How's it making us feel and think?
You really think it has?
Yeah. I'm young enough that I don't know if I could tell you beforehand, like what it used to be
Yeah.
like before. And then turning off. Really want to dig into what true rest is and how device usage plays into our rest. Thanks for taking some time to think.